Today we will talk about XLM and the design of the Stellar Consensus Protocol, which originated as a fork of the XRPL, except it has come a long way since then, and in a lot of ways is significantly more technologically advanced. And the redesign happened because Tammy Camp of Stronghold was actually so successful that the old protocol broke and failed.
Why don't you come and be our first head of growth at Stellar? And that's how I became a professional in 2014, in the blockchain. So I was the first head of growth there. We put on I think 4 million users there in a little over 4 months. And at that point, that was a lot of usage. And so it kind of, we knew we had to kind of rewrite the software to kind of take that capacity. And so, that's actually the time when I met my co-founder, Sean of Stronghold. He was actually the first developer ever on Stellar because he was previously a Ripple gateway at the time.
We will be breaking down the Stellar Consensus Protocol white paper, except it will be presented in a way that is really easy to understand, and it is also pretty engaging. Here is the white paper itself, and it is extremely technical, and it explains a lot of the concepts and equations and the kind of information that I am not an expert on. So what I did was I used Google LM to help present it in a way that is a lot easier to understand.
Welcome everyone, ready to dive deep. Today we're taking on the Stellar Consensus Protocol, or SCP. We're using the OG white paper by David Maizières himself as our roadmap. It's pretty fascinating read, really digs into how trust works.
Yeah, the way this paper lays out a system for reaching agreements, even when there's no central authority calling the shots, is mind-blowing. It's like they designed the internet, but for money and with security baked in, even if some folks aren't playing by the rules.
So paint a picture for our listeners. Why is something like SCP even necessary in the first place? What problem does it solve?
Well, the paper kicks off by pointing out the flaws in our current financial system. Fragmented, slow, leaves a ton of people out in the cold. High costs. Transfers take forever. It's a system begging for disruption.
Feels like we're stuck in the slow lane with this old system, sending telegrams when everyone else is using instant messaging. So how does SCP propose we fix all this?
The core idea is to build a system that's as open and innovative as the internet, but for moving value around. Like, imagine sending money across borders as easily as you send an email. Low fees, practically instant settlement.
That sounds incredible, but I bet our listeners are thinking, wait, if there's no central bank or government in control, how can you trust it's secure?
That's the million-dollar question, and SCP tackles it with a pretty elegant solution. Federated Byzantine Agreement, or FBA for short.
Byzantine Agreement sounds kind of intimidating. Is this where things get super technical?
Not really. Think of Byzantine as just acknowledging that in a truly open system, not everyone will always be honest. FBA lets the system reach consensus, even with some faulty, maybe even malicious participants.
So it's built to withstand a few bad apples. How does that work in practice, though?
Picture a network where each participant has their own little circle of trust, like a group of financial advisors they rely on. You only accept a transaction if enough of those trusted connections agree it's legit. And they're doing the same with their own trusted circles, so you get this web of verification.
So instead of blindly trusting one authority, you're relying on a network you've personally chosen. That's a pretty powerful concept. The paper dives deeper, though, right?
Oh, yeah. SCP uses a two-part system to achieve this. The nomination protocol and the ballot protocol.
Two protocols. All right, break it down for us. What does the nomination protocol do?
Think of it like a brainstorming session. Everyone throws out their ideas for potential transaction sets, like tossing suggestions into a hat. But here's the twist. The system gives more weight to ideas from more trusted nodes, speeding up agreement.
Not a total free-for-all, then. It nudges everyone towards agreement by highlighting those trusted voices. But what happens after the brainstorming?
That's when the ballot protocol takes over. This is where the rubber meets the road, deciding which proposed transaction sets actually get accepted.
The decision-making stage. Tell me more.
SCP uses ballots. Think of them as formal proposals to add a value to the system's ledger. Each ballot has a counter to prevent gridlock if there's a disagreement.
So if things get stuck, you bump the counter and try again. Slick.
Exactly. There are two key phases: prepare and commit. In prepare, everyone votes on whether a ballot's even valid, kind of like a quality check. If it passes muster, the commit phase is the final confirmation.
So just tossing out an idea isn't enough. It has to pass muster with the network before it makes it to the ledger. Now, the paper also compares SCP to Ripple's XRPL protocol. Why is that distinction important?
It's fascinating because both SCP and XRPL share some common ancestry, but they've evolved differently. SCP's original design was actually based on XRPL, but then branched off to prioritize true decentralization.
A story of evolution, then, starting from the same point but heading towards different goals.
Precisely. XRPL relies on a fixed set of validators, making it more centralized. SCP lets anyone join the party, truly open and decentralized.
So with XRPL, you're trusting a specific group to maintain the ledger. With SCP, it's the collective wisdom of the entire network. Big difference.
And that impacts control and scalability. SCP's openness makes it prime for mass adoption, crucial for something as global as finance.
It's starting to sound like a real contender to the way we handle money today. But wait, the paper hints at another potential use for SCP blockchain voting.
Oh yeah, imagine those principles of trust and transparency applied to something like US elections. Every vote recorded on a blockchain, verifiable, tamper-proof, instantly auditable.
That'll be revolutionary. How realistic is that, though? What hurdles would we have to overcome?
There are definitely challenges. Balancing voter privacy with transparency is tricky, and ensuring everyone can access the system, regardless of their tech skills, is key.
Valid points. But it feels like those challenges are worth tackling if it means a more secure and trustworthy voting system. Let's circle back to SCP's core strengths. The paper emphasizes its suitability for mass adoption, right?
Absolutely. SCP has several big advantages. First, easy entry. Anyone can participate, not just big institutions. Second, it's fast and efficient, unlike those energy-hungry systems like Bitcoin. And third, you get to choose who you trust within the network, like picking your own financial advisors, in a way.
Fast, efficient, and puts power in the user's hands. Compelling combo. Before we move on, though, that split from XRPL, the paper mentions they started similarly. How do they end up on such different paths?
It's interesting, SCP was initially an XRPL fork, meaning they shared the same underlying tech, but the SCP developers decided to go all in on decentralization, ditching XRPL's pre-selected validator set.
A testament to open source development, then, taking a good idea and running with it in a new direction. Pretty cool.
It really is, and that's what makes SCP so exciting. It's not just about the tech, it's about creating a system that's open, inclusive, trustworthy, something that benefits everyone.
Well said. All this technical talk, though, while fascinating, might leave our listeners wondering, what does this all mean for me? Why should I care about SCP?
That's a key question, and I think the answer lies in how SCP empowers individuals. Imagine a world where you have more control over your financial data, transactions are faster and cheaper, even voting is more secure and transparent. That's the promise of SCP.
Now we're getting somewhere. Not just tech for tech's sake. It's about a more equitable and accessible future.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just finance. We talked about voting, but SCP could revolutionize industries like supply chains, healthcare, countless others.
Feels like we're barely scratching the surface here.
We are, but I think we've laid a good foundation for understanding what SCP is and its potential to change how we think about trust and collaboration in a decentralized world.
This isn't just a deep dive. It's a glimpse into a future where power is distributed, trust is decentralized.
A future worth exploring further, for sure. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll unpack the specific mechanisms that make SCP so robust and secure.
Stay tuned, folks. Things are about to get even more fascinating.
So picking up where we left off, let's zero in on what makes SCP so unique in the world of consensus protocols. The paper spends a lot of time on this concept of quorum slices, and it's definitely worth unpacking.
Quorum slices sounds kind of appetizing, but something tells me it's a bit more complex than your average pie chart. Walk me through it.
It's a clever way to make decentralization really work. Imagine each participant in the network has this slice of connections, nodes they trust, kind of like their own little network within the bigger network. These slices, they're the building blocks for how agreements actually happen.
Okay, so I've got my slice of trusted connections. You've got yours. But how do all these slices come together to reach agreement across the entire network? That seems like the tricky part.
The key is you only accept a transaction as valid if enough nodes within your slice agree on it. Then those nodes, they're checking with their slices and so on, creating this chain reaction of trust that spreads throughout the network.
Like a ripple effect. But instead of water, it's trust spreading outward. But what's stopping someone from creating a slice full of malicious nodes trying to game this system?
That's where SCP brings in this idea of quorum intersection, fancy term, but it basically means any two quorums, those groups of nodes that can reach an agreement, they have to overlap. That clever little trick prevents any single slice from calling the shots for the whole network.
Ah, so even if someone tries to create a rogue slice, it's powerless unless it intersects with other, more trustworthy slices, like a built-in system of checks and balances.
You got it. And this ensures the system's safety, meaning all the honest participants will eventually agree on the same set of transactions.
Okay, so SCP is safe, decentralized, open to anyone. But the real world, things don't always go as planned. Servers crash, connections drop, sometimes people just act in bad faith. How does SCP deal with those imperfections?
That's where dispensable sets, or D-sets, come in. A D-set is a group of nodes that can go down without bringing the whole system to a halt. Think of them like backup generators for a power grid, built-in redundancy.
So even if some nodes go offline or start acting up, the network keeps chugging along as long as they're part of a dispensable set? But how do you decide which nodes are dispensable? Seems like a delicate balance.
The white paper lays out some specific conditions for a D-set. First, removing it can't break that quorum intersection we talked about. Second, it can't stop other nodes from forming a quorum. It's carefully designed to ensure fault tolerance, AND, security.
I'm noticing a trend here. A lot of thought went into anticipating problems and building in safeguards. But I'm curious, how does SCP tell the difference between a node that's just offline versus one that's actively trying to disrupt the network?
That's where the concepts of intact and befouled nodes come in. An intact node is playing by the rules, hasn't been influenced by too many faulty neighbors. A befouled node, on the other hand, is either malicious or has gotten compromised by hanging out with too many bad actors.
So it's not just about what a node does, but also who they hang out with. If a good node spends too much time with bad nodes, it can become befouled. Digital guilt by association.
Good analogy. And SCP is designed to isolate these befouled nodes, keep them from dragging down the rest of the network. But remember, even in a system with some bad actors, SCP still ensures safety and liveness for those intact nodes.
That makes sense. Let's shift gears for a moment and revisit the nomination protocol. We touched on it earlier, but the paper goes into some pretty fascinating detail about how it actually works.
Right, the nomination protocol, it's all about finding a set of potential values, in this case transaction sets, for a particular slot in the ledger. It's like a preliminary vote, everyone throws out their options.
Sounds straightforward enough, but there's got to be a twist.
You know it. Each node is temporarily assigned a priority, determined by this special function called a hash. And here's the key. Nodes are encouraged to nominate the same values as those higher priority nodes.
So it's not just a random free-for-all. There's a mechanism to nudge the network towards agreement by giving weight to proposals from those more trusted nodes.
Precisely. It helps speed up consensus without sacrificing security. Kind of like a self-organizing system, the most trusted nodes naturally rise to the top, influencing the direction of the network.
Elegant solution.
Yep.
But even with this prioritization, disagreements are bound to happen. And that's where the ballot protocol comes in, right?
You got it. The ballot protocol, that's where the real decisions get made. Accept or reject a particular value for the ledger.
We talked about how ballots have counters to prevent gridlock, but the paper also mentioned something called neutralization. What does that mean in this context?
Neutralization, it's key to keeping the system from getting stuck. If a ballot gets bogged down, maybe network issues or just disagreement, nodes can simply move on to a higher numbered ballot, like hitting reset, but in a way that preserves the integrity of the system.
Makes sense, but how do we make sure that reset doesn't lead to conflicting versions of the ledger?
That's where compatibility comes in. A new ballot can only be committed if it's compatible with any previously committed or stuck ballots. So they have to propose the same value, ensuring consistency even when the counter is bumped.
Like a system with built-in memory. Even when you move to a new ballot, you're still bound by those past decisions. Clever way to maintain consistency.
It is, and that's one of the things that sets SCP apart, its ability to handle the real-world messiness without sacrificing security or consistency. Now, the paper does acknowledge that SCP isn't perfect. It has its limitations.
Every system has its trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the limitations of SCP?
One is that SCP relies on participants choosing their quorum slices wisely. If someone makes bad choices about who they trust, it can impact the security and stability of the whole network.
So it's not completely foolproof, still relies on the collective wisdom of the participants to work properly. But isn't that inherent to any decentralized system?
To a certain extent, yes, but SCP does provide tools and guidelines to help folks make informed choices about those quorum slices. We talked about quorum intersection, dispensable sets. Understanding those is crucial for picking slices that maximize security and a default tolerance.
Not just throwing everyone into the deep end, there's guidance and support to help people navigate this world of decentralized trust.
Exactly, and the Stellar Development Foundation, they offer resources and assistance to help people really understand SCP and make good decisions.
That's good to hear. But even with those safeguards, I can imagine some potential pitfalls. What's to stop a group of malicious nodes from colluding, trying to censor certain transactions?
That's a valid concern, and the SCP designers definitely considered it. While a group of bad nodes could try to filter transactions on the input side, SCP's structure makes it really tough for them to succeed in the long run.
So, not impossible, but a very high bar to clear. What about the opposite scenario? Could a group of well-connected nodes try to manipulate the system to their advantage, maybe prioritize their own transactions?
Another possibility, and it highlights how important choosing your quorum slices carefully is. Remember, you have the power to decide who you trust in the network.
Right, like picking your financial advisors, you want people who have your best interests at heart. But I'm curious, how does SCP handle the fact that participants come and go all the time? Nodes joining and leaving the network, how does that impact stability?
Important point, and that's where SCP faces some challenges. Unlike systems like Bitcoin, which can handle a lot of churn, SCP needs a certain level of continuity among participants to run smoothly.
So, if a bunch of participants suddenly disappeared, restarting the network would be tough without some central coordination.
That's right. SCP is designed for environments where participation is ongoing, like a global financial network or a long-term voting system. But the paper does suggest some interesting possibilities for reconfiguration, even voting on changes to the system's parameters.
So there's flexibility built in, the system can adapt and evolve. But let's be real, this is some pretty complex stuff. Even with your expert explanations, some listeners might be feeling a bit overwhelmed. What's the main takeaway here? Why should people care about SCP?
At its core, SCP is about building a more trustworthy, equitable world, shifting power away from those big, centralized institutions, putting it back in the hands of individuals. It's about systems that are transparent, accountable, resistant to corruption.
Now we're talking, not just about the tech itself, but using it to empower people, create a better future. But there's still so much to explore.
There is, and in the final part of our deep dive, we'll step back and consider the broader implications of SCP. How could it reshape our world in the years to come? What are the ethical considerations we need to be thinking about?
Sounds like we're heading into uncharted territory. Can't wait. Okay, so we've journeyed deep into the technical nuts and bolts of SCP, but now I'm ready for the big picture, the long view. What are the implications down the road? How could SCP actually change, reshape the world as we know it?
That's what really gets me fired up too, you know? If SCP lives up to its potential, it could completely change how we think about trust, how we govern ourselves, even shift the balance of power.
Less theory, more reality, though. The paper talks about SCP opening up financial systems to a whole new wave of participants. What does that actually look like on the ground?
Imagine a world where, I don't know, just about anyone with a smartphone, right, can access any financial service you can think of. Loans, sending money across borders, even insurance, all without needing a bank account or perfect credit history. And it wouldn't matter where you live.
So it's not just about making the systems we have more efficient. It's about opening doors for people who've been left out. That's a big deal. But the paper also hints at possibilities way beyond just finance, right?
Oh, absolutely. We touched on voting, but think about supply chains. With SCP, you could track every single step a product takes, from raw materials to your doorstep. Total transparency, accountability at every stage.
No more fake products, no more worrying about ethical sourcing, consumers knowing exactly what they're buying. Game changer. What other industries could this impact?
Healthcare is a huge one. Imagine how SCP could revolutionize the way we store and share medical records, give patients more control over their own data, while making it easier for doctors and hospitals to collaborate securely.
It really feels like SCP could build a more trustworthy, transparent world across so many different areas of life. But, and there's always a but, with great power comes great responsibility, right? What are the ethical things we need to keep in mind as SCP starts to take off?
Couldn't agree more. That's a crucial question. One concern is the possibility of power becoming concentrated, even in a decentralized system. Like if a small group of nodes gain too much influence, it could undermine the whole idea of fairness and openness that SCP is supposed to be about.
So even though we're moving away from the traditional gatekeepers, banks, and governments, we need to be careful about preventing new forms of control from popping up.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of unintended consequences, always a factor with powerful technology. SCP can be used for good or bad. It's really up to us to make sure it's used responsibly, ethically.
A good reminder that technology is a tool. Its impact ultimately depends on the choices we make as a society. We need to have those tough conversations about our values as we navigate this new landscape. But I have to admit, even with all the complexities, there's this real sense of excitement about what SCP could bring to the table.
Yeah, I feel it too. It's like exploring a vast new frontier, so many possibilities.
An adventure full of challenges and 80 opportunities, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it's an adventure we're all on together. Developers, policymakers, everyday people, we all have a role to play in shaping the future of this groundbreaking technology.
Well said. And to all our listeners out there who've joined us on this deep dive into the Stellar Consensus Protocol, thanks for coming along for the ride.
We hope this has sparked your curiosity, got you thinking about what SCP could really do.
Remember, the future isn't something that just happens to us, it's something we build. And with tools like SCP, well, the possibilities really are limitless.
So keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Until next time, everyone, stay curious and dive deep.